or would you consider that unjustified?
There is 300 children have been killed today. 200 women have been killed today by the Israelis in Gaza. 1,200 children were injured. 1,000 women were injured today, just today and yesterday in Gaza. You are asking me the wrong question. You have to ask about what is happening in Gaza, which is under the siege for the last 17 years, which is under the offensive Israeli attack for the last 4 days. You keep asking about the Israelis, why you don't ask about the Palestinians.
So that's a fair question, sir. That is a fair question.
Excuse me, I have to continue. You are asking about the Israelis. You don't ask about the Palestinians. No one cares about the Palestinians. This is the story. The story is the occupation. 75 years of occupation for the Palestinians. We have to talk about the occupation and how the Palestinians are looking for this occupation, and how can we make an end for this occupation. This is the story. It's not the story about what you are asking about.
Okay, I understand your perspective. To be clear, after this interview, I will be interviewing a representative of the Israeli military, and I will be asking him about Israel's war crimes. I absolutely acknowledge that Israel has committed war crimes. In fact, I have written a book with a whole chapter about Gaza and the war crimes that have been committed against Gaza there. So please do not suggest to me that I do not take this issue seriously. However, let me finish. I allowed you.
Thank you for clarifying I allowed you to finish. Thank you for clarifying that. But
so now that we clarified that, sir, let me.
You can't compare.
I understand.
Okay.
I'm not comparing anything. I'm not comparing anything. But please allow me to finish. My question for you is everyone living inside of a settlement a legitimate military target for Hamas?
According to the international law, the settlers are not civilians.
So, sir, again, human rights organizations have said the illegal status of settlements under international humanitarian law does not negate the rights of the civilians living there. The fact that a person lives in a settlement, whether legal or not, does not make him or her a legitimate military target. So in light of the fact that human rights organizations would argue that even if settlements are illegal, the people living inside of them are still considered civilians, how do you see moving forward Hamas's vision of whether or not settlements are legitimate military targets?
Well, the legitimate thing which I believe in, that Palestine is our land. Our people are living on our land, challenging the occupation for the last 75 years. On those 75 years, the women, the children were killed by the Israeli soldiers, the Israeli settlers. Their homeland was taken. They were replaced by Israelis who came from everywhere in the world. They talk different languages, and they claim that this land is for them. If you ask any one of them about the grave of his father, he will take you to Poland or to Argentina. But if you ask any Palestinian about the grave of his 17th grandfather, he will take you to some place in Palestine, showing you the graves, telling you, this is where my 17th grandfather was buried, or maybe before that. We are in this land from the days of Jesus Christ. Don't ask me about those settlers and those soldiers who are killing my people every day, every time. And this is the fact which creates the resistance of the Palestinians. The Palestinians did not start the war.
Let's talk about the Israeli response to the Hamas attack, which has been horrific. Israel is bombing Gaza and declared a complete siege. It's cut off food, fuel, and water from being admitted to over 2 million people. Thousands of Palestinians are going to die. One resident from Khan Yunis said, this is a bloody war that is different from previous wars. What is going on right now is total annihilation. We see this horrific response by the Israeli government. My question for you is, have the actions of Hamas over the past week made things worse for Palestinians on the ground?
The Israelis have done this before. They done that in 2014. They cut the electricity from Gaza in 2014 for 17 days. They cut the aids for the hospitals. In 2014, 2,500 Palestinians were killed. In 2021, more than 1,000 Palestinians were killed. No one remembers the numbers because they are only Palestinians. But I want to tell you, they were shocked by what had happened to their army. 11 points, military points were attacked by the militants of Hamas. The soldiers were killed or being taken as war prisoners, and the Israelis were shocked. This is the main troops attacking Gaza for the last 10 years. They fall down in a few hours. This is the shock. They want to get back the image of Israel army. They want to show everyone that Israel can destroy everyone.
That's an interesting point, sir. That's an important point you're making. You're saying that Israel sort of commits to a certain kind of response when it looks bad, that Israel responds disproportionately, and that Israel already wants to use this as a pretext for destroying the Palestinian people. I'm saying if you know that's going to happen, then how do you calculate the decision to launch an attack knowing that a university is going to be bombed, knowing that power is going to be cut off, knowing that fuel is going to be cut off, knowing that people are going to die because of the Israeli response? If you know that, why do you still make the attack, particularly when the Palestinian people don't have a say in whether or not that's going to happen?
This is a good question. You know, the fact that the Israelis are killing the Palestinians on all the ways, all the times. For example, in West Bank in the last 10 months, more than 500 Palestinians were killed. Most of them were civilians. They were shot in the streets, just demonstrating peacefully against the Israeli troops. The fact which everyone have to understand it, that this occupation is killing the Palestinians all the time. He's not giving them any chance to have normal life. He's not giving them the chance to be independent and to have their independent sovereign state, even after 30 years of signature of Oslo Agreement. He's not implementing any international resolutions. He doesn't care about the international law. So we are facing this fact. The Israelis are killing you if you are treating them peacefully or if you are resisting them. And at the end of the day, the occupation is still there. So it's better to resist than being slaughtered daily without even resisting the occupation.
What was the goal of last week's actions? What was the immediate goal of last week's actions? What would you say the target or goal was?
The goal is to make an end for the Israeli attacks against the Palestinians, to make an end for the Israeli attacks on Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa, and West Bank, taking over the lands, and to lift the siege on Gaza. The Israelis are planning for a long occupation on Palestine. And I think if they don't get the lesson from what had happened in the last 4 days, this army will not protect them. Their violence will not protect them. Even if they were supported by the United States, if they want to be protected, they have to acknowledge the Palestinian rights and to implement the international resolutions which gave the Palestinian people their rights without negotiations. Those are rights. No one can negotiate our rights.
Osama Hamdan, thank you so much for joining me on Upfront.
Thank you.
We tried repeatedly to get an Israeli army spokesperson on the show to respond to Hamas, but they canceled the scheduled interviews. For more on the developments in Gaza, we are joined by Israel's former deputy foreign minister and a former foreign policy advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Danny Ayalon. Danny Ayalon, thank you so much for joining me on Upfront.
My pleasure.
Danny, last Saturday, the 7th, Hamas launched a devastating attack. Thousands of rockets were fired towards Israel, and hundreds of Hamas fighters crossed into the country. There are reports of horrific killings of Israeli civilians, a clear violation of international law. In response, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened to turn the Gaza Strip into, quote, rubble, and the government announced a, quote, complete siege of the enclave. Since then, we've seen mass bombing in Gaza with reports that hundreds of civilians have been killed. Now, while the actions of Hamas are a clear, and I want to emphasize that, a clear violation of international law, isn't the collective punishment of all Gazans also, by definition, a war crime?
Not really, because the situation is very clear. As you mentioned rightly so, Hamas perpetrated an attack, which was a surprise attack. The IDF was caught unprepared, and they got a major victory for the first 24 hours. But who was this victory against? Babies and children and whole families that were massacred in bed. The IDF was nowhere to be seen. When the IDF came back now, they pushed them back into the Gaza. Now, the problem with the Hamas is that they're committing a double war crime because they are targeting only civilians. And they're using their own civilians, the poor Palestinian of Gaza, as human shields. And what Israel did gave them a fair warning. And I think this is the only way to do with them, is we told the Gazan people to clear the area temporarily so we can go and take Hamas out. And then, of course, they can come back. So this, by definition, is not a war crime. We understand the plight of the Palestinians. They deserve their dignity and everything else. But nothing justifies butchering families. This day, as you mentioned, 7th of October, was the day that more Jews were killed in 24 hours than any other day since the Holocaust. So you see,
I mean, without question, respectfully, this is a devastating moment, an extraordinary act of violence that again is a violation of international law. But you said a couple of things that I want to push you on. The idea of collective punishment is one of the things that we're talking about here. Electricity has been cut. Power has been cut. Fuel has been cut. The Gazan people right now are being punished for the actions of Hamas. How is that not by definition collective punishment?
Two things. First of all, Hamas has turned Gaza into an enemy state. So there is no law, nothing in international law that compels a country you are in a war with to supply them the electricity. Now, what do they use the electricity for?
As an occupying power, international law does say that you have certain responsibilities by law. But before we get there, even if we'll hold it for a moment, the power thing, there are residential buildings being hit. There are hospitals being hit. This is a densely populated area. The idea of being able to run away or to escape or go to a safe area seems impossible. Also, according to your own military representatives, you've abandoned the idea of knocking on roofs, that is to say giving a warning of dropping a non-explosive munition on buildings before people go. So people aren't getting a warning. They have nowhere to go. Residential buildings, schools, and hospitals are being hit. How is this not, again, an act of collective punishment? And how is this not a target of civilian, unless, of course, you're regarding everybody in Gaza as an enemy combatant?
Okay, well, I hear you. But again, what we gave the population is a fair warning. What would you do?
Is the fair warning? I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. Benjamin Netanyahu told everyone to leave the area. Where were they to go?
Okay, very. I mean, this is thought out. It's not something that we tell them go to the beaches, go drown yourselves. God forbid. Not at all. There is a huge expense, almost endless space in the Sinai desert, just on the other side of Gaza. The idea is, and this is not the first time it will be done, the idea is for them to leave over to the open areas where we and the international community will prepare the infrastructure, tent cities with food and with water. You know what? Just like for the refugees of Syria that fled the butchering of Assad a few years ago to Turkey. Turkey received 2 million of them. This is the idea. Now, Egypt will have to play ball here because once the population is out of sight, then we can go. You know what what Hamas did?
You said the population out of sight. Is that practically possible in such a densely populated area? And 40. I mean, you have 2 million people in a densely populated enclave. 47% of the inhabitants are children. Is it reasonable or plausible to think that all those people are going to relocate to this excluded area and be safe from a bombing attack? And again, we're saying there's warnings, but there are numerous reports on the ground that there are no warnings, that people are getting hit, that families have been killed from these attacks.
I'll tell you in a practical manner what we should do and what we can do. Create, like in the past in history, a humanitarian corridor. When there is a humanitarian corridor, and we have been discussing this with the United States, then we can guarantee in this corridor that nobody will get hurt. Now, again, I say there is a way to receive them all on the other side for temporary time on Sinai. Because what did Hamas turn out
on the other
Gaza?
side? Are we talking
Gaza,
about Rafah? Are you saying the other side that go to Egypt?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And Egypt will have to play ball because this is human life is at stake. And if you're talking as
human life is at stake because you're cutting off power, you're shutting down hospitals, you're bombing residential buildings. I mean, right now, there is a hospital that does not have sufficient power. There is a hospital where people are literally going to die. And Israel's energy minister, Israel Katz, said no electrical switch will be turned on, no hydrant will be open, no fuel truck will enter until the Israeli abductees are returned home. Now, the ICRC spokesperson, Hisham Mahana, said that by cutting that power, hospitals are going to turn into graveyards. This is not an ideologue. This is the International Committee of the Red Cross. They're saying that because of your country's actions, not the actions of Hamas, not the actions of Egypt, but because of Israel's actions, the hospitals are going to turn into graveyards. How is that not a war crime? How is that defensible by any standard?
First of all, the war crime, if anything, is Hamas. They are the ones, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Hamas does not allow, sometimes when they can, they keep those civilians captive. They don't allow them to run away because this is what they want. Now, I know the area, and I suppose you're talking about the main hospital, which is the Shifa hospital. Yep. The Shifa hospital has been turned into a Hamas bunker. If Hamas wants to save them, they should just leave their arms, come out, and nothing will happen. But as long as they keep the Shifa hospital, just like schools and kindergartens, as bunkers, and they fight out from there, there is no law. There is no law in this universe that protects them. And this is what we're doing, and this is why the world
are there any independent reports? Are there any intelligence reports that show that the Shifa hospital is primarily a Hamas bunker and not an actual medical site?
Yes, and you know what?
Where?
You know what?
Where?
And mark my words, and you can show it again because I know it's recorded. When this war is over, and we will bring in the international press to Shifa and to all the bunkers, the underground tunnels that Hamas has created in Gaza, ask intelligence services of every country in the world, they know it. But anyway, what I'm saying is...
No, just to be clear for the audience's benefit, no intelligence services has claimed that. Not one government has claimed that the Shifa hospital is a Hamas bunker. That is your claim, and I want to be very clear that that is your claim. And you're saying you don't have any reports, but that I should just trust you.
No.
Mark your words. Trust you. And later on, it'll be proven true.
I'm telling you, everybody will see.
Okay.
After the war is over.
Fair enough. I have to move on just in the interest of time. But I want to continue on this same vein because the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, said that he was deeply distressed by Israel's announcement of a siege on the Gaza Strip. He said that the humanitarian situation, quote, will only deteriorate exponentially and that crucial life-saving supplies, including fuel, food, and water, must be allowed into Gaza. So the UN is saying you must do this. You are saying you're not going to do this. How do you...
No, we're not saying that.
He's saying doing it immediately. What I'm saying is what you're doing.
No.
He's saying doing it immediately.
I got you. I'll tell you exactly what we're saying. I'm saying we will do everything for the Gazan people. Once and now we demand immediate surrender, unconditional surrender of Hamas. If Hamas people come out with their hands up and clear their weapons, believe me, everything will be restored to Gaza. It is Hamas in Hamas hands.
Now I understand. Thank you for clarifying that, sir. I think we're actually on the same page here. You're saying that once Hamas leaves, you'll grant the Gazan people food, shelter, fuel, electricity, hospitals, schooling. And if they don't, and if Hamas doesn't leave, then they'll continue to starve and die in hospitals. You are defining for the international community right now collective punishment. You're saying until Hamas acts differently, the 2 million people in Gaza are going to be treated this way. And once Hamas acts differently, these 2 million people in Gaza will be treated better. That is exactly what collective punishment is. You're holding them accountable for the actions of others. That is the definition, the textbook definition of collective punishment, sir. Now, you may accept that that's what you want to do, but this is absolutely a contravention of international law.
Well, I'll tell you exactly. No, had we pushed them into the wall, we're not pushing them to the wall. We want to open a humanitarian corridor so they can leave. But if Hamas,
so that who can leave? So that who can leave? Citizens? You're saying civilians can leave, but only through the Rafah border, correct?
At this point, yes.
So they can't
because
come.
Where else?
Your country. They can come into Israel.
I'm telling you one more thing I want to say.
No, but I want you to address that point. Don't just smile, sir, respectfully. You're saying you're making a corridor. They can go to Egypt. You're bombing them. You say you want to save them, but they can't come in.
First of all, I'm not smiling. I'm crying in my heart. I'm crying in my heart for all the butchery of thousands of Israelis. Why do you think the world is with us? Why do you think the world is wise? All the international media was there. So don't talk to me about collective punishment. Don't talk to me about humanitarian. These are new rules of the game. There is no coexistence with Hamas, which is worse than ISIS, and we will not stop. We are allowing the population to leave. But if Hamas will surrender, there won't be any problem whatsoever.
Danny Ayalon, thank you so much for joining me on Upfront.
Pleasure.
All right, that is our show. Upfront, we'll be back